Coming up on Network Africa, more protests by the opposition in Kenya pushing for electoral changes before this month's rerun. And hey, we're still celebrating Nigeria's 57th independence anniversary. Fellow citizens in South Africa get in on the celebrations. Plus, protests for an independent English-speaking Cameroon turns awry as 9 people are killed while clashing with the police. Hello everyone, I am BC Adebayo wishing you a happy independence celebration. We'll be getting into the celebrations in a bit, but first, let's begin with stories that made headlines over the weekend.
Crew members of a military cargo plane crashed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. An army officer said the plane caught fire shortly after taking off from Kinshasa's Njili airport and crashed in a nearby reserve controlled by the military's elite Republican Guard units. The plane was headed for the eastern city of Bukavu. Libya's Benghazi commercial port has reopened after being closed for 3 years due to fighting between rival factions there. The port does not export oil, but imports gas and some petroleum products, as well as general cargo. Local costs for these are expected to be reduced by the port's reopening. The Tunisian Navy says it has rescued 98 people fleeing to Europe when their boat started to sink off Kirkena on the southeast coast late on Saturday. It also said it had arrested 43 illegal migrants from 4 boats off Zarzes, also in the southeast coast. The North African country has been praised for its democratic progress after a 2011 uprising against autocrat Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, but successive governments have failed to create jobs for young people, some of whom head illegally to Europe to seek work. Meanwhile, security forces have arrested about 550 Tunisian and African migrants trying to sail to Europe in September against only 170 in August.
Now, calm has returned to Cameroon after the deadly independence protest that left at least 8 people dead. The president, Paul Biya, condemned yesterday's violence on all sides after soldiers shot dead at least 8 people during agitations by English-speaking secessionists. The unrest comes on the 56th anniversary of the incorporation of the Anglophone region into Cameroon. The activists calling for independence of the region raised the separatist flag, staging protests in several towns. And still on yesterday's protest, the mayor of the town of Kumbo, Donatus Fonyoe, says 5 of the casualties were prisoners shot after a jail caught fire. Demonstrators made symbolic proclamation of independence as part of their protest. Counter-demonstrations in support of the government and a unified state also took place in the major city of Douala. The divisions in the Central African state date back to the post-colonial settlement. Cameroon was colonized by Germany and then split into British and French areas after World War I. The country was later unified in 1961, but English speakers accused the Francophone majority of discrimination. Last week, Cameroon banned public meetings and travel in the English-speaking regions. Protests from the English-speaking minority began late last year over concerns that they were often excluded from top civil service jobs and that the French language and legal system have been imposed on them. What started as a movement for greater equal rights has turned into a demand for independence. Now, joining us now in the studio is Simon Nditewo, a Cameroonian Anglophone lawyer. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, madam.
So tell us, what exactly do the Anglophone people want in Cameroon?
Your question commands thousands of answers because it's a lot of things. Because you just want to go straight to the point. What the people want is independence. It's not a myth. It's not a game say. It's not a kind of you know, something that they want, but it is something that has been. They have been an independent state before. The country was in 1961. It was a federal system before. The then president, Amadou Haijo, changed, you know, and conducted a referendum in 1972, which cleared and kept aside the federal system and then brought the unitary system. And so after all the discriminations and the imposition of French language into the English-speaking courts and schools, imposing, I have been a victim of that when teachers were sent from the Francophone session to come into our universities and lecturers, and they were struggling with English and speaking Pidgin at the same time, and we were the one helping them to teach us. So the people want independence. Why? Because initially what they call federalism has failed, because the stakeholders doesn't want to step down, come down to listen to the people, because they feel that they are over there and we're down here and they can listen to the people. So the people want independence. Since you can give us the federalism, give us our independence.
Well, why do you think that the government has not answered to the calls of the Anglophones for independence?
The government can answer the call for independence simple because the government has its own selfish motives. Let me tell you something, madam. The Anglophone session of Cameroon actually has about 60% of the Cameroon's wealth and all that, and then it employs half of the people in Cameroon. You know, the corporation, they call it CDC, Cameroon Development Corporation, is found in the southwest, and it employs half. You know, it's the second employer of the country. So it's located in the English-speaking zone, and with the oil and other facilities, you know, other things that are available, raw materials, you don't expect the government to give independence. And so that is it.
But why are the people trying to pass their message across through a protest? Are there better ways that you could, you know, put your request or demands forward other than protesting?
Well, there are better ways, and they began it. They began better ways. I mean, the lawyers had already tabled a plea on the table of the president for over 6 months, and there wasn't any reply, as it has always been. They don't listen to the people. You know, they don't listen to the people, as it has always been. And so the lawyers got fed up, took to the streets, asking for reforms, because sending French magistrates into English court is a perversion of the common law. And so they went forward to protest, and in the attempt to protest, they had, you know, unscrupulous and illiterate law-keeping forces beat them on the streets, torn their dresses, and actually took their wigs and gowns. It was a humiliating thing to the Cameroonian lawyers. So I think that is why they have decided to take to the streets instead of going through dialogue as it's supposed to be.
But do you see this yielding any positive results?
It doesn't yield any positive result, but if the government wants the people to behave this way, for them to listen to them, I think is the best choice they have made, because absolutely there is no other thing else than to take to the streets.
But do you think that this probably has anything to do with President Paul Biya being in power for so long?
Well, being in power for so long is not the problem of the Englishman right now in Cameroon. They don't care. They are not asking President Paul Biya to leave from the presidency. What they demand is their independence. He can remain there and die. Even his corpse can roll, as it has always been, because he's not presently, as we're talking, he's not in the country. He is in Geneva after the General Assembly at the U.S. of the UN. He left for Geneva, and he's still there with his cohorts. So the people want independence. President Paul Biya can remain there, but I lay a lot of blame on him, because he's supposed to be the one to come down to the people and ask them what is wrong, and they have to table their request, and they made it. So last year, when they struggled to handle the whole thing, and the people made demands, they decided to arrest them and lock them up, because it has always been the thing. If you speak in Cameroon, you're a terrorist. So,
well, we hope that you know, everybody can come to the dialogue table and then find a common grounds and, of course, find a solution to this. But many thanks for coming on the program, Simon Inditewo, a Cameroonian Anglophone lawyer. It's good to have you on the program.